And after another couple of weeks, we get to our 5th month.
Well, I guess that would be my experience of everything we've got. Or teaching anything. I think I can do it in 2 weeks and it takes 10 or 20. Simply because everything sort of expands when you start delving into things, doesn't it? And almost like, I thought this was going to be simple. I thought this was going to be an easy one. It ends up, okay. Very interesting when you, when you think of it, it's like, how could we possibly think that we could contain God within our understanding and it not continually stretch us and open up other avenues of when he reveals himself. I find it very interesting when you sort of engage with people who are so stuck in theology that they have to have everything so tied up that nothing is possible outside of what they've tied up, and it just, in a sense, means that they can never really get to know God, who can never be tied up to our understanding of him. Even Proverbs 3:5, when it says, do not lean of your own understanding, it's like anything that I create as my understanding of, even out of my experiences of God, I can't lean to, because then I will become reliant on my understanding of what I've experienced of God rather than the actual experience itself. So that means that I'm continually reliant on a daily relationship with him, not on what I learned about him yesterday. Because if I trust in that, then I'm going to get stuck there and not continue on the journey of discovery where I can have progressively revealed who God is.
On a recent ascension, we had mentioned, interesting enough, I always saw it when I saw the City of Refuge. I thought when it went up, it was like buildings that were like, it was beautiful and that. But what I saw in the attention was that wasn't the City of Refuge. The City of Refuge was us.
Yep.
And I always thought, I always pictured, I don't know why my whole thing, and afterwards it seemed so stupid when I pictured bringing down a city. We are the city.
Yep, we are. Yeah, and in everything that we do, we may well do things, but that's just where we are, rather than that's who we are and that's what we are. And I think that's the problem with the theological need for, I need to tie this down. I have to get this in a way that gives me security, because now I can trust in this. No, I can't trust in theology or doctrine. I can trust in God, and I can trust in my relationship with God, and he will shake me to such a degree that hopefully all that theology and stuff will get shook loose from me, so that I can continue to trust in my relationship with God and therefore not be stuck. I don't want my journey to end, and I don't want to get stuck in places that hold me there and don't allow me to continue. Because it's an ongoing journey of discovery which will continue age into age into age. We're just in this one at the minute, trying to find who God is in this age, so that we can then enter into the ages to come, carrying with us that experience of relationship, not our understanding that we've developed from that relationship. And that is where the problem lies. We are, I'm in everything looking to help people engage God, not try and understand him from my perspective. Otherwise, you will be stuck in my theology. My theology is really my relationship with God, which is all I can share. But what we're saying is everyone needs to engage God for themselves. Otherwise, they're only trusting in what someone else has said. If what I share opens up the possibility that people can go and engage for themselves, that's the key. I'm not going to come out and put a title on what I believe or what we believe and put a label on it, because as soon as you put a label on it, then people will then label you. So it's like, if anything, it's like, no, everyone needs to go to God themselves and find him for themselves. Then everyone can have that relationship with him. Now, I'm not saying that that doesn't mean we believe certain things, but we hold those beliefs in relationship with God himself, not as a substitute for him or to tie him down to those beliefs, because he may well unravel that. You know, Jesus came and said to the people of the time, you've heard it said, but now I say unto you. You know, it's just people who get stuck in theology do not believe that God could say anything about what they believe because they so strongly believe it. You know, I've had some quite interesting debates over the weekend on Facebook with people who, you know, are trying to warn people off the shack and things like that, you know, because the film's coming out next year and stuff like that. And they are, you know, just criticizing, you know, the theology of a novel. You know, I mean, it's just like, don't you realize that was the story of someone's life and their relationship with God? He wasn't trying to write a theology book. So they were basically saying, don't read The Shack, don't listen to it. And I think the more people say don't do something, the more people say, well, I'm going to find out what all the fuss is all about. You know, and it was very interesting that. And the funny thing I discovered, far away down this thread, I mean, this thread in the end ended up with like something like 500 or 600 posts. I mean, it developed into this huge thing. And I found halfway through it that the guy who was actually saying to people, don't read The Shack, had never read it himself. So didn't even have a first-hand opinion about what the theology of The Shack was. So I thought, well, okay, that's really ironic, you know. But what I found was those that hold such a strong position end up getting personal and accusory and not demonstrating what God's love is all about in the first place, you know. And it becomes, well, you're a heretic, or you're in deception, or you're in this. And then they take a post that you posted and then they twist it to say what they want it to say to confirm their view. And I just refuse to get involved in the tit for tat in this post. But I was very interested to see people's mindsets who are stuck in a theological position. And we went into, you know, translations of the English Bible, and it's just like, no, you know, I was accused of talking about interpretation rather than translation. I'm saying, well, who translated it in the first place? And what did they use to translate it? Pure logic or their previously already understood ideas? So how can you trust what it actually says when it's been translated from a preconceived idea? So I said, well, I read it now by going to a Greek or Hebrew interlinear and make sure that the words that it says actually are there, and that I understand if I have a problem with a particular verse or what does it really mean, I will then go and ask God about it, rather than, okay, well, this Bible says this. It was so funny, you know. I had to smile a number of times of the things I was accused of in this thread that I never ever said, but that's what happens. So, you know, when we start to, you know, talk about, you know, our relationship with God and the experience of that relationship with God, you know, we have to be aware that some people won't like it. And when they don't like it, they often get quite personal in their opposition to it, you know. And in the end, I had to say, look, you know, I wonder how many people you've won over to your point of view when you present it in such a contradictory way and confrontational way, you know. And someone else came onto the thread who I know, and they basically said, they quoted this little parable, and it was really funny because the person didn't get what it meant. What it was saying was, how do you really know what you really believe when what you believe has been conditioned in you from the beginning by other people? And, you know, and he just threw this thing out there, and it just, unfortunately, just provokes people to be not loving, you know. And one poor guy, he got accused of needing deliverance on this thread because it was hilarious, and he didn't take offense to it, and then he played up to it a little bit and pushed a few buttons. But what I found was, it's like we need a relationship that with God that enables us to go to him and talk to him, and with an openness of heart that says, I'm open to receive what you're going to tell me and not put you in a box. Because if I put you in a box, then you are a God of my own making. And unfortunately, a lot of the world is turned off by the God that we have presented to them. Yeah, and we need to present the real God, and he's very different, very different. Anyway,
when I first got into this, I remember listening to a tape by an Australian guy. He talked about what you have to do, because you have to get into the new wineskin. And seek first the kingdom of God, and all other things will be given unto you. You don't ask. If you get the higher level, is you don't ask God for anything. You just keep seeking his kingdom, and everything else is taken care of. So it didn't matter what happened around me. If I wanted to yell out help, I didn't, because seek first kingdom of God. I've got to go. I've got to push through this. And after a few years went by, I continued, and all of a sudden, a couple of things happened where I kind of just said, help just this time, please. And I found that actually when I started doing that, my relationship actually got better.
Yep.
I don't know. And it's because I had taught you never ask. Have you ever heard that? Where you don't have, the higher level is you don't ever. He looks after everything. You just keep seeking the kingdom.
Well, yeah, but yes, and I to a degree believe that, but the outworking of that is relationship. The kingdom is a relationship with God. So if I'm seeking first the kingdom, I'm seeking first the relationship with the king. And therefore he is the one who's on the throne of grace, who says, come boldly to find help in that relationship. So yeah, I trust that he will work it all out when I'm in that relationship of rest and trust, not in the denial of my situations and hoping that they might all work out some way outside of the relationship. Because when I go and in relationship, God reveals many of the things which will get me out of situations. And why wouldn't I go to him who says, come to him and find help? And I love being in that place of actually being with him on the throne of grace and resting in him and trusting him in relationship. Otherwise, again, it's just a formula. Don't ask for help, because it'll all get worked out. So then it's no different from the faith movement saying, put your faith in this verse and it will all work out. And try really hard. Don't ask for help. Because if you ask for help, you're not in faith. And it's just, whole thing, all those things are non-relational. They're formulaic without the relationship. And I don't want it to get into a formula. I have a relationship. It means I don't have to get a formula to put my trust or lean to my own understanding of that formula for God to work it out. And that's the sad things of those type of all these things. They trust in a doctrine or a understanding or a formula rather than the relationship. It's the relationship that we're all about. We can engage God personally in relationship with him. So we don't need a formula. But we're all on a journey, and so I find the fruit of these things. I mean, I think Gamaliel was a very wise rabbi guy, and essentially it was like, look, if this is not of God, then it won't come to anything, and then you don't need to bother about it. If it's of God and you're opposing it, you're in trouble. So wait and see what the fruit's going to be, rather than opposing something that might be of God and get yourself into trouble. And that's really what is the fruit of those who are engaging God in a love relationship. I don't see those people seeing that now they've got a license to sin, or now they don't need to preach the gospel or share the good news with people I don't see any evidence of that. The people that I've met who are pursuing God in intimacy, whether I agree with all the things they say, they're genuinely loving people. They're genuinely people who are inclusive and want a relationship and are open. They're not the dogmatic people who insist on getting into an argument with you. You know, and I'm not going to argue with a political spirit or a religious one, because they just want to be proved right. And you end up getting into an argument of who's self-righteous enough. And what's the point of that? You know, there's no point arguing with someone who's trying to prove a point to you. It won't work, you know, which means that it has to come back to our relationship. Yeah. And that winds people up who want you to give an answer rather than, well, go and ask God yourself. You know, if you have a problem with what I'm saying, well, go and ask God about it. You know, so I'm not going to argue with you, because I don't have to prove that I'm right. It's an interesting journey we're on.
Hello?
Yeah, hi, Anne. Yeah.
It's Norma.
Norma, yes.
Angela's good too.
Yeah, well, I can see, because you have two different names on different things. So anyway, all right, Norma. Anyway.
So I have a question about mandate. And my question is, you know, if there's something on your heart, you know, is it appropriate to ask God for a mandate for that particular thing? Or do you have to go to God and see what his mandate is, like for him to give you a mandate? So there's two things. Do you, like, if there's something already playing on your heart or on your mind, however, you know, and the Lord didn't say this is your mandate, but it's something that's caught your attention and it's on your heart, is it appropriate to go and ask for a mandate for that thing? Or do you wait for God to give you a mandate for either for that or for something else, or his own mandate?
Yeah.
Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, I can totally get what you're saying. I'm interested. What color is your nail thing that's right in front of me? You're painting your nails there by the look of it. What color is it? Okay. Well, again, you know, there's no right or wrong. You know, if God gives you, I mean, if you go and engage God, what I found was I was going and engaging God looking for a mandate, and he was looking for a relationship. So I was finding that I wanted to, because I was looking at being like Jesus, I only want to do what I see the Father doing. And that had become a focus rather than a relationship. And so God had to rebalance the situation by drawing me deeper into relationship and not telling me what he wanted me to do. And what I found in that was, and this was just a season, because he wanted to realign things a little bit in my life. And what I found was, the more I was drawn into relationship, the more that my heart was aligned with his heart. And then the desires of my heart in alignment with his heart led me towards asking for a mandate, or led me towards the desire for a mandate, which then he gave me, because I was coming out of his heart and out of the relationship of being within him in his heart. And so if the things that are on your heart are because of worry or anxiety, then asking for a mandate to get out of worrying and anxiety is probably not the best thing to do. The best thing to do is go and take the worry and anxiety to the throne of grace and let him embrace you and bring you to a place of rest, which then from that place of rest, he can then show you the strategy of what he might want to do when you're at a place of rest rather than in a place of anxiety or worry. Because when we're in a place of anxiety or worry, we want a formula or an answer to get us out of it, which can often cause us to strive to do something rather than going back to God with the situation that we might have and actually asking him to reveal what he's doing through that situation. And he may want me to stay in that situation for a while because it's actually doing something in my life. Or actually, he may reveal that situation is a ploy or a tactic of the enemy, and it's something that I need to overcome. And then he gives me the strategy to overcome it. So if it comes out of relationship, then I think it doesn't matter whether God touches your heart first, and the desire of your heart then draws you towards a mandate, whether you ask it or he reveals it, or that you are engaging with him and he gives you a mandate that then you then start to meditate on, that then becomes the desire of your heart. Because he's given me mandates that were definitely not the desire of my heart, and I didn't want to do them, and he gave them to me. So I have a choice then. Am I going to not want to do this because it doesn't align with where my heart is at this point in time? Or am I going to then meditate on the mandate and allow God to then change my heart so that will align with the desire of my heart? My heart will want to do that mandate. And I've had a number of mandates that I've been like, I don't want to do that. I can see that's going to end up in this or that or the other. And it's like, I'd rather not. But I would, because my desire is for relationship, I'll let that draw me back into relationship. And then I'll ask God things like, well, why don't I want to do that? Can you reveal to me what the problem is? Is it purely that I think it's going to create some hassle? Or is it because I don't have your understanding of what that is? Show me. So you can use everything in these situations to bring us back to the relationship that will reveal our heart and then enable us to go forward. And you have a destiny and you have a scroll, and there are things on your scroll which will undoubtedly lead you towards mandates for specific things. Now that you could say is already written within the tablets of your heart, to have those things unveiled so that you're all drawn towards them. And every day when I engage as a living sacrifice, one of the things I say when I engage the ark of the presence of God is, unveil your heart and write on the tablets of my heart today so that the desires of my heart will lead me towards fulfilling what your desire is. But I've moved away from I want a list to tell me what to do today, into I want to continually stand in your presence and continually be with you, and therefore flow out of the relationship, rather than I have a list of A to B to C to D to E today, and I also have a few subcategories that explain what I'm supposed to do, because I've discovered that God actually wants to entrust to me in sonship the ability to enable me to create the way to do the things he wants me to do, he has for me to do, and it be my choice which way I do it. Because I, like everyone else, find it much easier if someone says do this and do it this way. But then that becomes a formula. And God doesn't want a formula, so he mixes it up all the time. He doesn't want us to get into a rut or into a season of, or way of doing it that is always the same. Because Jesus healed people in many different ways. So he healed the blind in many different ways. He may have spoken to receive their sight. He may have made some mud and stuck it on their eyes. He may have spat and put it on their eyes. He may have done many other different things. Now, did God the Father show him exactly what to do? Or did God the Father give him his heart to heal the blind, and then Jesus, as a son of God, chose which way to do it? And I think that's more likely of what it's like, because that's how God is wanting to draw us, I believe. So the creativity of our sonship, he entrusts us to be able to outwork what his desires are, but through who we are and who he has made us to be. So that 10 people can hear God give them a mandate to do something, and 10 people will do it differently. But that's all good. It's only religion that will try and tie it down to, you must do it this way, and this is the only way, and this is the right way, and if you don't do it this way, you're wrong. And God isn't like that at all, I found. So I find that that whole issue is more about the relationship rather than it being fixed. And I think both ways apply. And if both ways are flowing out of a relationship, then that's fine. You know.
That's very good. Thank you, Mike. That's
Okay.
good.
All right. Any other thing anyone wants to talk about, or any other questions? Anything you want to share?
Oh, add one thing to that,
Yep.
Mike. I noticed that a couple of times on our ascension, you know, just sort of maybe illustrating a part of this, that you know, sometimes we step in as a group. You know, we just ask the Lord for his heart, not as for where he wants to take us on that particular ascension. You know, we go in and then he will take us, you know, he'll surprise us, take us different places. We'll see different things, have different experiences. We've been asking specifically, you know, we thought, okay, let's see how this goes. And the last time we asked to go to the throne room, and this was an ascension with, you know, people who are doing this kind of stuff. So, you know, it's sort of training and practicing experience. So we went, so we asked the Lord particularly to take us to the throne room. And amazingly enough, you know, everyone was seeing throne room stuff. We went to the throne room, and then, you know, we were shown different things, and, you know, declaring different things as we come back. So I found that very interesting, that, you know, sometimes we go in and we just go in generally and he shows us different things, and then when we ask particularly, or when we meditate, in this case we had meditated on scriptures around the throne room for like sort of from the week previous and coming into this ascension. So yeah, do you have any comment on that?
Well, again, I think it's desire. And I think when God responds to desire, and the desire that you showed by engaging in scriptures around the throne room has opened up a door for you to go through that into the encounter and the experience. And I think that shows, you know, the power of using the word as a doorway into encounter. It does do that. It opens up a way for us to experience and encounter the word, and then once we're in that, then God can begin to unveil things to different people in different ways, and people will have different experiences of it, but it will all be coming out of the fact that you've stepped through the same doorway. You know, if you step through, you know, the picture I use mostly is, hey, there's an open heaven and a ladder, let's go in there, and then Jesus will determine what he wants to do when we go there, and that's fine. But there's nothing wrong with, okay, no, we want to come before the ark of the presence of God today, so we're going to use our understanding of that to open a door and use the scripture around that, or even use our thinking and focus on it in meditation, that door will open. Essentially, you're learning to go to follow the pathways to places that you have access to, so that they become places you can access instantly whenever you need to. And I think that comes from practicing and engaging and using a door, you know, because as we mature, we are given the ability to engage and act in certain places, because that's where we need to engage. And it's most of my encounters now, unless God says, hey, let's go for a walk and we're gonna engage something, are me going to be in the place where I am. And I have been able, now can access multiple places at the same time and flow from all of them, because I've practiced a lot and my mind has been renewed to the fact that I'm not limited by linearity in the heavenly realms, and I can be in multiple places and engage all of them. But I've been to all those places before, so they're all places that I have accessed by desire and through scripture and through doorways in my life. And now I can be in all of them, so I can be in what was and what is, and therefore I can administrate what will be all at the same time, flowing from one to the other, not having to go and do things here, then I can go and do things there, but now I can go and do things here. Now I can just be there, and therefore now I can just be whatever I need to be in any situation, flowing from those positions. And therefore I don't have to go through a process like I used to. And I know that my spirit is administrating now, and I didn't administrate that consciously at the beginning of the day because I was doing something else with God, and he was talking to me about something and we were engaging something. So I didn't go and to my mountain and do this. I am on my mountain and I'm doing that all the time, because I don't step in and step out. I'm living in that realm, and I'm living in that realm in a multi-dimensional way now, which is liberating. And I can enjoy my relationship with God so much more because I can just flow from that rather than having to go and do stuff. So it's much more of a relational thing than it was. Now, it was no problem learning how to do all those things because that was part of my journey. I couldn't do what I'm doing now if I hadn't have learned how to make pathways to all those different places in the realms of heaven. Those pathways are now part of me, and so I can be in all those places now, and function from them, which, you know, to me is a much better way. But I had to learn, you know. So it's okay to use the doorway into encounter. It's okay to ask God to take you wherever he wants to do. It's all good. And whether you're doing that corporately or individually, you know, the key is that you're in relationship with him in it, and it doesn't become a purely intellectual thing or spiritual experience. It's part of you in understanding deeper things of God and how he has created heaven to function and all those things in relationship with him. You know? So yeah.
Mike, if I understand what you said is your spirit is multitasking. Your spirit. Yeah. And if I want to follow up that, if your spirit is multitasking, was it always and you only became aware of it? For example, I remember when Sanju Sandhar talked about in the election that Donald Trump's spirit, he saw him up there with Abraham. Yet, if you talk to Donald Trump, he'd say, he's nuts, you know, or something. I don't know. But the fact is our spirit doing things that we're not even aware of? Or in your case, your spirit was always doing a number of things. Now, as you said, now I'm, I think, in my soul aware and can take that in. But was it always happening? Or did you come into that?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Let me think. I would say that when I started to engage in a dual realm experience rather than stepping in and stepping out, something changed dramatically. And I am maybe not fully aware of what my spirit was engaging with. I certainly became aware that my spirit was doing things that I wasn't aware of because I didn't need to be aware of them anymore. Whether my spirit was able to access multi-dimensions that became something I was able to do, or as you say, understand that I was doing, when my mind got deconstructed and some of the framework that was there got changed, and I was shown that capacity that I had. So I don't know. I can't say fully. I know that before I was aware of the multi-dimensional capacity, if I was doing it, I wasn't doing it as effectively as I'm doing it now, because I'm aware of a change since I've understood that that was the case. And so I'm now choosing to engage that, whereas before I wasn't. So I was still consciously engaging when my spirit and soul were functioning together, by going to the ark, by going to the temple, by going to walking back into what was, coming back and standing in the four faces. I was doing all those things consciously in a linear fashion. And now I'm not doing them consciously in a linear fashion. And that seems to have had a more powerful effect in what I'm doing. So maybe I'm just learning to flow better in it, and learning that that flow is now available. And therefore the time where I was doing linear things, I'm now have more capacity, because my soul doesn't have to spend the time doing that. It's spending more time receiving the flow, perhaps. You know, so I can't totally answer, because I don't know, but I know it's more effective now that I do know what I'm doing, because I just can draw from it. And you know, I mean, people have talked to me and said that my spirit was doing things, and they've seen it. And people have talked to me about, they've had conversations with me in that realm that I have no recollection of. But when I asked them to tell me what I said and in what context, I totally resonated that that must have been me, because it was exactly what I would have said if I had been conscious of it. So I am aware that my spirit has definitely been doing things. I'm not sure whether it was multidimensionally doing things or not, but I know it is now. And that seems to have changed once the capacity for that was reconnected within my mind, that I then became conscious of that ability. So I that's all I can say. I think something's definitely changed since I'm aware of that. Even though living in dual realms, I was aware that I was doing many things that I wasn't conscious of, but I don't really recollect whether any of them were multi-dimensional. They may have been, but the main thing is now they are, and I can sort of live that way deliberately, because now I set my desire around operating that way, and effectively that becomes something now that's being outworked. And it definitely has created a greater ability to engage God in deeper intimacy. That's seemingly what God was trying to do, was to refocus my attention on trying to do things to please him and just being with him, and those things pleasing him anyway, you know, because I think we can still try and please God and it still be something we're doing out of a hidden motive, which is maybe not pure. So I don't believe God wants me to please him. God just is pleasured by my being in relationship with him, and that therefore flows out. You know, yeah.
Mike, I remember a few years back, I had an experience, and I saw my spirit. My spirit was engaging, and in eternity, and my spirit seemed to know what it was doing, and it was familiar where it was, but I didn't have a clue what my spirit was doing. So from that, I drew that because our spirits are from eternity, and that was home. That is home for us. That my spirit knew what was going on, or our spirits know what's going on. The problem is that it's educating my soul in the spiritual things of God in order to connect with this earth, this realm.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that? Or so is our spirit, like when your spirit goes there, has your spirit always been familiar, because that is home, is it not? That's where it came from. It always existed.
Yes. If you're talking about being in what was, and where my spirit was before things were created, other things were created, yes, there's a familiarity with that. And in a sense, we know that in that place things are non-linear, so everything is now. But my spirit was also involved in after things were created, and before I was physically had a body to come into, I still had things I was doing in the created realm as a spirit being, a light being, a luminary, or whichever way you want to describe it, and being part of the creation process. And when my brain was reconnected to some of these things, I started to recall some of that. So the memory that my spirit had became accessible to my consciousness, and therefore I realized why I'm like I am in certain areas, because that's how I've always been, even when I was doing things on a purely spiritual basis rather than the physical one. So yes, I think what I've discovered was that has hugely challenged what I thought I knew from my cognitive experiences of God subsequent to that, having been born again and coming back into a relationship with him. So much of what I thought I knew about God there doesn't line up with what my spirit experienced, and now I've then begun to experience again by being able to focus into that area. And that challenges what I thought I knew all the time. So what I thought about God being love, for instance, and I've had many experiences, both physical experiences and spiritual experiences of God being love, and I would have said that those were pretty intense, but they were nothing compared when I reconnected with the sort of eternal circle of Father, Son, and Spirit, and realized how they loved each other, and that they've opened that circle up for me to stand in the midst of it and enjoy their relationship, and be flowing out of that, which has changed my perspective to people. I mean, a few years ago, if I had been involved in the debate that I was involved with over the weekend, I would have done it very differently. I would have been much more confrontational. I would have been trying to prove a point. I would have probably reacted wrongly to the accusations and the things that I was accused of, and I would have defended myself, and it would have been very different. But because of my encounter with God and how God, even when we're his enemies, he loves us, and he's, that type of scriptures that you get when you read about the sort of nature of God, and Ephesians, where it talks about it's always been his plan, and it's always was been his plan that we would be sons and be in sonship and in the image of God and all those sort of things. It's just like that has just changed how I engage people, you know, and the need to, you know, ego of being right and, you know, being offended by people's negative things that they say. I just didn't get offended, you know, and I thought, wow, that, you know, man, I would not have been that way a few years ago. So something has really changed. And I think what's changed is mostly my understanding of what love really is. And, you know, that love is kind and love is patient and love is long suffering. And, you know, the whole Ephesians 13 or sorry, 1 Corinthians 13 thing, but through experience rather than just the word, what it says. I now have experienced that in God himself, in Father, Son, and Spirit relating to one another, that I realize it is not, it's just totally other focused. It's never self-focused. So the Father, you know, sends the Son because he loves the world. And, you know, the Holy Spirit comes to point people to Jesus, but Jesus wants to point people to the Father, and he doesn't want the attention to be on him, even though he's the express image of the Father. It's like this just wonderful self-deferential, wonderful non-egotistical love, which, having experienced that, it's like that is essentially motivating me differently. And, you know, I can't say that I can sort of click my fingers and say, oh, that was the point where things changed. But you notice when you're put in situations where you know you would have reacted in a certain way and now you don't. And, you know, I was surprised that I didn't have to do this but God was teaching me. He put me through into this situation, and I asked him whether I had permission to join this thread of discussion, and he said yes. And what I learned from it was that I have changed. I also learned from it that I now understand the perspectives of others who may have different views, and I understand their mindsets more, which when I begin to teach things which they might not like, I will do it in a way which will be motivated by love, not the desire to prove a point. And even if I do begin to share some of my testimony and story of where I've encountered God, it will still be, you need to go and engage God for yourself to find if this is true. Not, I am telling you this is true, now just believe me. Because that will just be creating another system that people put their trust in, rather than the relationship where they can go and explore who God is for themselves, you know. Yeah. So I definitely can see, you know, how this has changed who I am, and that really is who I was always called to be before I got caught up into this world that, you know, formed an image that came from the X side rather than the inside. And having all that stuff stripped away, and now beginning to realize just how different God is from what I thought he was like, you know, it gives me greater compassion for others who are stuck where in what they believe God to be like. But I have more compassion for them, and I don't have to argue with them, which, you know, is a major change, really. Yeah.
So, Mike, in that, your spirit was always at that place because it was always in alignment with God. It was really the process of you bringing your soul into alignment with your spirit that enabled that to happen in you. The way it was not, I think.
Well, yeah.
I mean, it was always there.
Well, my spirit has always well, my spirit pre-existed my physical soul, body and soul. So my spirit has a function and relationship with God before this realm, if you like, or before me becoming a living being here. And my journey has definitely been to realign my soul and body with my spirit. And that's been a long journey, you know, of essentially death to ego, and death to my soul being the setting the agenda for that, even if it was good things. Definitely that's happened, and obviously there are a number of testimonies that I have that are part of my journey on that process. And you know, the latest one with God, you know, deconstructing my mind and deconstructing my foundational belief systems are part of that journey, which has freed me to more fully engage with God and do that spirit, soul, and body. So although I don't do it to try and figure it out, I understand and know. You know, what I didn't know before, my spirit is aware of things even now that my soul is not yet caught up with, because my spirit is continually ongoingly engaging with God, both within an eternal sense and within a heavenly realms temporal sense, because they all function on different times, if you like, in terms of speed of light and things. So I'm just learning to be one, I guess, as Father, Son, and Spirit are in oneness with one another. My spirit, soul, and body needs to be in oneness like that, which is again coming from the example set by God himself, so that I can be like him, and that my spirit, soul, and body can operate together in oneness. Now, I'm not at a place of perfection, far from it, but I am in a place of growing, hopefully in maturity and love, and I can see evidence of that, and other people have saying they can see the same. You know, so my manner has changed to a degree, and motivation has changed also to go with it, but it's definitely a huge process to get that soul and spirit separated and reconnected, reintegrated into oneness. And I guess that is probably the sort of the most difficult part of this whole process, because it's not easy to let go of things. It's not easy to for the soul to stop trying to get its identity from itself, and rather than from who God made us to be and who the Spirit knows us to be. It's not an easy process, and you know, but such a worthwhile one when you continue to pursue it. And I'm sure that, you know, in the coming year, God is going to reveal more and more that will surprise me, you know, because I've been surprised by love, you know, and I believe probably I'm going to be surprised by peace, and surprised by joy, and surprised by patience, and surprised by all the other fruit of the Spirit, as I'm drawn into that aspect of God's character and nature in my continued relationship with him. You know, so yeah.
So a person that's religious, if I'm religious, and probably it's religious spirits on me, the fact is that in a way what I'm doing is I'm fortifying my soul over my spirit.
Yes, because you're using some sort of formula, doctrine, understanding to lean to. You see, as God has begun to deconstruct my mind and my belief systems of these 9 pillars that have held up this construct within my brain, my consciousness, it's no good him deconstructing that and removing all the pillars if I then start to put in pillars of my own based on my own understanding. Even if my understanding is based on something which is correct, I'm still putting in another construct. What he said he was going to replace the 9 foundational pillars with was the 9 roots that flow from the tree of life. So it's a flowing rather than a constructing, and therefore I don't need to lean to my understanding to flow, because I just have to flow. I don't have to understand how the water goes down the water course in a particular, I just have to lie in it and let it take me where it's going to take me. And yeah, it's great that I can look around and see all the scenery on the journey and be aware of where I'm going as I'm experiencing it, but I don't have to be told what it is before I do it anymore, which is a change that's taken place without a doubt, so.
Jeff, did you have a question? Because I don't want to monopolize the takeover. I guess it's just you and me, Mike.
Okay.
So, because I guess our whole thing, from the moment we come into connection with God, what we call born again, I guess, in the evangelical world, is the fact it's just reconnecting our soul, or not even connected, because our soul was never connected with God, and then getting it so it flows with God through our spirit. And the fact is, it's really that whole process, I guess, and really that's what everything you've done is just reintegrating your soul so it takes its proper order.
Yes.
And it's the fastest way you can do that, but there's no fast way of doing it. It takes time.
Well, there's no shortcut, no, because in a sense, our soul has drawn most of its understanding about everything from the outside in. And because most of us have been brought up in a religious system that has focused on understandings which are less relational, then our relationship with God is framed by those understandings and limited. By definition, it's limited by what we believe God to be. Now, when you then start to have, the personal encounters with God, this is when you get this cognitive dissonance. It's like, how can that be? How can you be like that? Because that does not compute with either, my experience previously or what I have been taught about you. What I have got from what other people have said about you. And I think, therefore, when you begin to have the experiences and they get deeper and God starts to reveal himself to you in deeper ways, you have a choice. Am I going to allow God to reveal himself and therefore challenge what I believed before? Or am I going to stay secure in what I believed and therefore not able to go deeper with God? And some people want to stay because they're fearful, because they had a God presented which creates fear, and therefore they don't trust God to go deeper because they don't feel that safe. And I personally the more I've encountered God that flows from the inside out, the more that's challenged what's come from the outside in. And until, I'm only looking from the inside, I'm not looking outwardly anymore to get things from there. It comes from the inside. Now, of course, the religious people will say, "Oh, you're creating this from your experience. You're not basing it in the Word of God." And they are to a degree correct, but is that a bad thing? Not when your spirit is drawing you towards God in love and setting you free from the way God is presented by those very people. And I know enough of who God is in the Word because I've meditated and encountered him there to not be in danger of going off with the fairies somewhere and coming up with some, wild thing that God isn't really like, because I go off into this fantasy world. That's not what it's like. It's like the relationship itself brings safeguards, because that relationship is a relationship in love. If I suddenly come out and tell you that, God is some alien being from another dimension and he's this, that, and the other, you aren't going to believe it because God's love. Well, unfortunately, some people did believe it, because they were gullible, looking at the gifts rather than the fruit in someone's life. And that's why Jesus said it's the fruit which was going to give people a clear understanding of whether to trust you or not whether they can do miracles and signs and wonders, because even the enemy can do that. It's the fruit. And what is the fruit of? The Spirit, which is essentially based in love. And I think that's the key. I know that everything that God reveals to himself to me about himself cannot contradict love, because God is love. So I know it can't contradict love, but what it can contradict is my understanding of what love is from a theological perspective that is not what it really is. So all over I'm being challenged, but it's the security is my relationship is a love relationship. So I'm not going to come out and say things which contradict that love relationship. And if I do, then you have every right to say, well, where do you get that from? Now, the problem comes with people who are so bound by theology that their understanding of God and love is restricted by what they already believe, and is not cognitive dissonance is not possible for them, because most of them don't get experiences. And some of the people I've debated with the other weekend, they have no personal experience. They've never been into heaven. They've never been into a realm of God. They've never been into eternity. So they're arguing from never being there, and therefore I don't really see any validity in their argument, because they don't have any personal experience. So they just have information, because knowing must come biblically by personal experience. Otherwise it is just secondhand information that we've got from somebody else. So I'm never really going to listen to someone who has secondhand information as opposed to someone who has firsthand experience. I will always weigh someone's firsthand experience in the light of God being love. And I'm not saying that everyone who doesn't have firsthand experience, that some of the things they believe isn't true. Majority of what they believe is true. But it doesn't mean that truth is something that they know by experience, and therefore it carries very little weight. It carries very little weight when someone comes out with, well, this is what I believe based on this theory or this doctrine or this someone's book, or well, we've always believed that. And when you actually go back and look at the early church fathers, you realize that they didn't believe a lot of what we believe now. So God is having to undo what the Dark Ages put in place, because it was a system of control that developed, that then the writers of the Bible, particularly when they translated it into English, were paid to keep that as a system of control, which is why I don't trust everything that it's translated into English. No, I'm not a Greek scholar who can read the original Greek, even if we had the full Greek manuscripts, to be able to just read it fluently. So I have to then use my engagement with the living Word of God to meditate and talk to him about what he really means, rather than what someone else has said he means, you know. But what I found is my experiences having no way ever actually contradicted that God is love, or that God makes judgments, or is a kingdom is based on righteousness and justice, because I know righteousness and justice won't ever contradict one another. So when someone says justice is this and it contradicts righteousness, then I have to say, well, I don't think you're coming from a correct perspective of what God is like, because you're presenting him in a way which doesn't line up with righteousness and justice. You know, because the framework that people are coming from is that justice will always mean punishment, or eventually eternal torment, which actually I think all justice is outworked from the foundation of the cross and what Jesus did for us. And what Jesus did on the cross is the basis of justice that we can live in, because Jesus has died for us and he set us free. So justice is the outworking of the victory of the cross, not some thing which is just a principle. It's all centered in Christ, and Christ being a full representation of who God is and manifesting through the cross the fullness of what his love is. You know, so justice is an outworking of what Jesus did. Yeah. So, yeah.
But again, the problem always being that if that's your foundation of the truth, the religious part of it, then you, as you said, you can't see outside of that, which keeps you programmed that it bounces off you when you do get truth. So you're always kind of living the kind of lie in a way, where I've got to run around and tell everyone about Jesus because I don't want them to go to hell and stuff like that, rather than relax and let there be a flow.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're driven by the religious aspect of it.
Yeah.
Just like if someone wants to change a jot, dot, or a tittle in the Bible, I want to shoot them because you can't do that. You know, when I don't even understand it myself anyway, so it doesn't matter. But you got to stand up.
I mean, I'm not saying that a lot of the English translations of the Bible are incorrect. I'm just saying that some of them are translated in a way which is misleading deliberately, because they were translated from a particular position, whether they were paid to do that or, I mean, you know, those that basically say, you know, the King James version of the Bible is the only one we can trust, which is a lot of people still maintain that, you know, are just deluded. You know, in reality, you know, and yes, I understand that many other translations leave out hundreds and hundreds of words that should be included because they have come from a particular perspective, you know. So I'm saying is we can only truly know what the Bible really means in relationship with God. You can't do it independently through study or anything else. So even when I read a Greek interlinear to find out what the words actually were in Greek and what potentially those meanings could have, I still take it back to Jesus and say, as the living word, what did you really mean here? And sometimes he'll tell me, and sometimes I'm not ready to hear what he's going to say. So he'll take me on a little bit more of the journey before he's able to share some things, you know. But it comes through the word is a living word, you know. And most of those people who sort of talk about the logos of God and the written word, and that's the foundation, don't realize what the word itself says. You know, it's the Rhema word, which is a lamp unto our feet and a light unto our path, not the written word. So if we're only relying on the written word, then we're not going to get the guidance we need purely from what is written, because God wants to speak to us and give us a now word to particularly lead and direct and help us in our daily lives, which means I want to spend more time talking to him than reading about him and trying to figure out if something in the Bible can help me, when I can talk to him and he can tell me direct, which to me cuts out a whole way of we need to study to know the truth. The truth is a person that I have direct access to, who lives in me. So why wouldn't I take advantage of that relationship rather than avoid the relationship and only try and figure out what he's trying to say by reading a book about him? You know, why would I want to read a book about him only rather than talking to him? Now, I'm not saying that I don't want to engage in the word of God. I do, to help other people rather than mostly for myself. You know, I really don't need to read the Bible to ask God's opinion. He may quote the Bible in giving me his opinion if he chooses, but I don't read the Bible to get his opinion. If I was then going to share that opinion with other people, I may well use the Bible as a point of reference so that they can connect to what God's like through that. So then they can go back to then ask him for themselves, which is the whole point. We all have to engage God for ourselves. Otherwise, we just believe what someone else has said, which is never, ever going to be knowing for ourselves.
And you know what? Whether you were going through the veil or not, even this is how people as Christians should be living their lives.
Oh, totally, yeah. Yeah, because in a sense, God is in us. He can still flow through us. It may not be as effective as establish it in heaven first, but God will take whatever he can get. You know, that's why he uses a donkey, you know, to speak through. And he has used people who, you know, genuinely we wouldn't use if we were making a decision. I mean, I've had people who I know are living in abject sin and addiction give me a word from God, absolute truth, and they're living a deluded lifestyle, and yet God has still chosen to speak through them to me. Now, that may be to test my humility and willingness to listen from them, but also to break open this preconceived thing that God can only do things one way. You know, and I'm always surprised by God. If I'm not surprised by God, then I'm really not in relationship with him. Because he must be surprising, because I don't know so much. Anyway. All right. Okay. Well, we'll leave it there.